Welcome to the Industry 4.0 Club's Fireside Chat. The club's purpose is to engage the power of a diverse worldwide talent to accelerate the global evolution to Industry 4.0. We accomplish this by hosting and supporting respectful, thoughtful, and interdisciplinary open conversations and creating quality content on wide-ranging Industry 4.0 topics to expand the reach of our community. My name is Mike Ungar, and I'm the CEO of the Industry 4.0 Club. I have over 40 years of leadership and experience, with most of that experience being in manufacturing at Michelin. I'm joined today by my co-host, Mike Yost, who's chairman of the club. Mike, would you please introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Mike. Welcome, everybody. As Mike said, my name is Mike Yost. I'm the volunteer chairman of the Industry 4.0 Club, one of the co-founders of the group. Spent 35 years in industry, with the last 15 years being on the industrial nonprofit side. So really excited to have you here with us today.
Thanks, Mike. Well, so today's topic we're excited to talk about it's entitled "The Time Is Now: Steps to Starting Your Smart Manufacturing Journey." And we're really fortunate today to be joined by Scott Cooke, CEO of Polaris Automation.
Yes, and Scott's been involved with Polaris since 1987. He began his journey as a drafter, progressing through multiple roles in the company to reach his current role as the chairman and CEO. With a focus on driving the company's vision and strategy, he's deeply committed to servant leadership, believing that true success is measured by the positive impact on the lives of customers, owners, and their families. He's a veteran of the 82nd Airborne Division and attended the Ohio State University. And he also holds a certificate with the Sesame Smart Manufacturing Roadmap Professional. So welcome, Scott.
Thanks, Mike.
Just for our listeners on LinkedIn, if you're listening to us live, we're happy to take any questions you might have and share them with Scott during the broadcast. So please put those questions in the comment box and we'll do our best to get to them. So we're excited to have Scott join us. Scott, you were in the Army and a member of the 82nd Airborne. So what motivated you, just to kind of help our audience get to know you a bit, what motivated you to join the Army? And what did you learn from that experience that influences how you lead your company today?
Well, to keep it relatively brief, in my late teens, early 20s, I was the product of not having a lot of responsibility, and honestly just thought I knew it all. Worked for my father, thought I knew it all, left, walked around homeless with living with friends for a while. And lo and behold, a recruiter called me and asked me if I was interested. And I knew that what I was doing wasn't working.
Yeah, it looks like we lost him. Hopefully he'll come back here in a second.
So I was just going to ask you, Mike, are you going to acknowledge that you were also in the Army when he comes back?
Yeah, no, being a veteran, it's great to hear that. And of course, Mike, in your bio, Scott, as you talked about, Scott talks about being committed to servant leadership.
Yep.
And servant leadership is something that in the military, I mean, we really, of course, there's lots of leaders, but servant leadership is a really important trait. And I hope he comments on that. Yeah. In terms of how people, how we like our leaders to lead in the military, and really it passes on to outside the military as well.
Do you want to talk maybe for a moment about how you met Scott and how we got to this point to have him come on as a guest?
Yeah, Scott, it's interesting because Scott mentioned that he's also a Sesame Smart Manufacturing Roadmap Professional. And Scott's company, Polaris, is a member of Sesame. And of course, the club is also a member of Sesame. And we had the opportunity to meet together at the Sesame National Conference that was in Nashville back in November. A really good conference, but we share a lot of the same interests. What I think is really cool about Scott and Polaris is the CEO. Scott didn't have to go through that training. That was pretty heavy lifting, to be honest with you. And he took the time to do that. And it just shows his commitment to the industry. So here he's coming back now. So
I was going to remind everybody that you do take questions, but one of the questions cannot be where did your guest go? So
Yeah. Anyway, welcome back, Scott.
It figures that would happen to me. We just talked about it too.
While you were gone, Scott, we were talking about how we met, and I was talking a little bit about our shared background in the Army.
Yeah.
And you were talking about how the 82nd influenced you. So maybe we could jump back into that.
Yeah.
A little bit.
The influences that I got out of the Army were life-changing. I came out a different person, truly understanding the concept of teamwork, chain of command, responsibilities, goals, and how you can achieve those as a team versus trying to do everything yourself, which that's the type of person that I was at the time. As far as leading my company, I don't lead my company like a military leader. We don't do push-ups and sit-ups and run 7 miles a day. I look at it from a servant leadership perspective, which wouldn't be a good model for the military, but I think it's a great model for businesses.
Actually, I was sharing while you were gone. Actually, it should be a good model for the military. In other words, in fact, you probably can think back to the best leaders and you think they were servant leaders, even though there's a chain of command like that.
Yes. And those people stood out and you respected them a little bit more than the lead with an iron fist mentality.
Exactly.
So, since we lost a little bit of time here, maybe I'll move us forward here a little more quickly to get us into conversation about smart manufacturing, right? So we talked a little bit about how you two met and what brought us here today, and we're going to talk about starting people's journeys. And so I guess, first of all, do you feel that companies are slow, or a lot of companies are slow to start? And are you seeing that in your reality? And what do you think some of the factors are that go into that?
So I'll say in the last year, I've totally changed my perspective of what smart manufacturing is. The SESME Roadmap Accelerator really helped to close some gaps there. But honestly, people generally are slow, and I'll say slow to start because of a lack of focus, maybe a lack of being humble, understanding that nobody's perfect and no organization is perfect. I think there's an overwhelming sense from my perspective. If you go online and start doing research, it gets to be too big of a topic.
Right.
And really it shouldn't be. There's a simple start, but somebody has to take the responsibility to do that. And they have to have somewhat of an innovative mindset to start to understand how you can bring those concepts into the organization.
Yeah, I think I sometimes like to differentiate between small and mid-sized and large companies.
Yeah.
Because the small and mid-sized folks typically, I find, are so focused on serving their clients today, I'll use the word, they don't have time, or they don't take the time to think out into the future, and they need help, right? Because they don't have the time to research, like you said, and that kind of thing. They've got to find a trusted partner quite often to do that. But your point's right. How do you take that? How do you take as a leader and actually pause long enough and think about the future and ask for that kind of help? Your point was that it requires a certain amount of humility, and I think that's spot on. Yeah,
and it requires change, and change management, and change creates anxiety, which prevents focus because there's anxiety associated with it. I think what we've been able to accomplish is creating a sense of there's nothing to be anxious about. It's a heavy lift, but it's a long lift. It's reps, not powerlifting.
Yeah, that's a great point. So I know you've worked with a lot of companies. Polaris has probably worked with a lot of companies already. What are some aspects of the journey, the smart manufacturing journey, that you've seen that are important for success?
Typically, most companies have some level of triage that needs to take place. And that's those big low-hanging fruit opportunities to do something. There's not been a company that I've been into and spoken with that doesn't have problems. Everybody has problems. I think the larger companies, and I always use the term that a large company is like a aircraft carrier, a smaller company is like a speedboat. And smaller manufacturers have the capability to be very agile and implement things. I spoke with a company a couple of weeks ago that they couldn't define to me what is MES, what is smart manufacturing. But through the conversation, I learned they're probably they're light years ahead of a lot of our other clients, and they're already doing it. So I started to look at that and I said, well, smart manufacturing actually can be summed up as common sense manufacturing in some cases. Because if you're bringing value to your business, doing what you've always done, you're doing common sense things, getting better. But being complacent is something that I see where people are trying to solve the problem before they even define what the problem is.
Mm-hmm.
And we try to go in with a sense of just calm down and let's make this simple. Let's look at one thing that we could solve that's going to bring value to the business. And more times than none, you can create enough value in 30 or 60 days to fund your initiatives moving forward. And that it's a great way to start, I believe.
Yeah. We also often hear people talk about smart manufacturing as a journey, and we go back and forth on that and try to get people's perspectives. Do you see it as there's an end destination like a journey would imply?
No, I generally state that smart manufacturing is more of a methodology than it is a thing. Nobody would stand up and say we're a dumb manufacturer. So the term, I mean, just look online, you're going to get 100 different definitions of what does it mean. And honestly, you have to look at it and say, what does it mean to me? Yes. And honest, the journey requires a lot of things. You're not going to go buy a technology, put it in, and you're going to become a smart manufacturer. There's a cultural component that I like to say is probably 50% of the lift of the journey, because getting the value is dependent upon the culture's adoption of the mindset of what does this mean from a continuous improvement mindset. Right. And that's just something that, not everybody is going to get it, but you can deploy processes that empower people with information that make their jobs easier. They'll buy into that.
Yeah. And a lot of that comes back to leadership, right? It's a
Absolutely.
Leadership opportunity. So, yeah.
Yes.
Well, and your point, you're right. You're so right about culture. It's no different than any other change that you put in place, right? If you want it to sustain, you have to have the right culture that's going to understand that sustainment's important. And your point about technology, I'm sure you've had some folks you've worked with, unfortunately, that they've leveraged technology, and then 6 months later they're not sure why they went down that road because it's not bringing the results they thought it would. Have you seen that happen as well?
Oh yeah. Working with a customer right now that has deployed 50 different projects, not necessarily tied to the business goal outcomes, but to maybe solve a problem. And they'll get some value out of that. But if you don't have an alignment of something that's going to help meet the business goals or impact the business goals, I mean, bottom line, leadership wants the P&L to be impacted. Everybody that's working towards that needs to understand what are the metrics that you need to focus on, and then what information helps you create that and bring it to life. It's all about data empowerment and people reacting, but the people need to be a part of that journey. because you're not just going to throw something in front of them and there's buy-in. We've seen that. I think the most important person in the room is the operator. And I probably heard that from somebody else speaking it, but it's the truth. This is not a top-down solution. It's really a top-down, bottom-up, gut-out opportunity. Identifying the culture. And I was just speaking with an individual this morning about this. He said, how do you measure culture? Well, culture, that's the $10 million question. How do you walk into an organization and understand their culture in an hour? Well, understand the leadership. You understand the leadership, you get a good idea of what the culture is if you've experienced multiple cultures.
Well, and I appreciate the comment. One of the things that I often talk about with leaders is you can't delegate culture.
That's right.
As a leader, that's your responsibility. And so, as you mentioned, if you get to know the leader and you get to know what leaders stand for, if they are walking the walk,
yes,
then you'll understand the culture. Now, sometimes there's a disconnect, right?
Yep.
Between what the leader says and what the leader does.
Yeah.
But if the leader is genuine and actually walking that walk, then yes, the leader is going to give you a really good insight into the culture, aren't they?
And the customer will ultimately experience it.
Yeah.
If done right.
Well, and I think it's, it's a sign of the times that I do think that smart manufacturing impacts all the people in the organization.
Mm-hmm.
But to your point, there isn't a well understood, agreed upon definition. So people are looking at it from different perspectives. And you may have business leaders that are assuming their people have what they need, or they be coming and asking, asking for more help, right?
Yeah.
And so do you see? I guess the process of getting people to collaborate and talk and listen to the voices you're talking about. Are you seeing people able to do that, or is that part of the work that you advocate for?
You recognize the deficiency in cross-functional teams, and we generally like to go in and talk to everybody, and that's a part of the Sesame Roadmap process. And it's so empowering when you talk to somebody and you understand what they're struggling with. And I'll give you an example. I was meeting with a customer and meeting with a maintenance leader and an engineering leader, and asked the question, do changeovers cause problems in your environment? And they said, I don't think so. We don't think that that's causing any problems. Well, 15 minutes later, the production leader of the organization walked in, and I asked him the same question in front of those two, and he said, it's the bane of my existence.
Yeah.
And that's that cross-functional discussions that just need to take place. And, I like to think, if you bring somebody from the outside into your organization and allow them to just conduct conversations, there's so much that comes out of those each and every time.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take much to do. It's just that first step of just be a little humble, and maybe just listen, because nobody knows it all.
I think you've talked about being humble and having a mindset a couple of different times, but I think that also requires that people trust you, right? So
absolutely,
it's really important, and I think that's another challenge for the industry. And one of the things that we advocate for here at the club is to find people that you can listen to and that you can trust, because in order to be humble and to be vulnerable and share those things, they're going to have to be comfortable with the person that they're sharing it with.
Absolutely. And you got to create, you have to create an atmosphere that, you're not there to change anything. You're really there to understand where the problems are. And guess what? You have the same problems that 1,000 other manufacturers are having.
Right.
So when you bring that outside person in, they can give you some level of case study of how those things were overcome. And they're just ideas, at that point, and you can take them or you can leave them. I don't come in knowing it all. I come in trying to pull out things that we look at and say, here's a component that you could get better at. And a lot of times this isn't a discussion around necessarily production floor plant machinery. We're talking about simple things, operational management and transactions that take place throughout the manufacturing environment. Mm-hmm. Has anybody ever really documented those transactions that take place? Because it matters, right, regardless if they're digital or not. There's just a whole host of opportunity to streamline that and make it more effective.
Right.
I just want to make sure I remind our listeners that if you are listening to us live and would like to pose a question to Scott, you can put it in the comment box on LinkedIn, and we'll be happy to share that with Scott. Scott, one of the things we talked about when you stepped away was that you took time to become that smart manufacturing roadmap professional. Mm-hmm. And I have to ask, what motivated you to do that? It's I know when I did it, it's a heavy lift. Okay, it takes some time, and of course, when you're running a company, it's really quite a dedication of time. So, what motivated you to do that? Let's say as a leader.
So about a year before, we were probably in our 10th year of really focusing on MES. And we really started to understand that this isn't about, it's not a transactional environment. So there's a certain level of, and quote unquote, consulting. But I didn't want our company to become a consultant. And not that that's a bad name, but it usually equates to extra zeros when we're talking about investment. So we started to actually provide consulting to our customers, but we didn't have a process. And we were going through an evolution of trying to define what is this process. We were selling a service to somebody, but there were no clearly defined outcomes of that service. And, I think it was a beautiful thing. We kind of sold the invisible. And when I heard about the SESME process, and this is why, this isn't, I think, typically something that the CEO of a company would go through, but I understood it to be relatively transformational in our growth as a business, as a systems integrator. Mm-hmm. And traditionally, a systems integrator works in a very transactional environment. A customer knows what they want, they know what they want delivered, they've created a scope of work, and now we go execute to that. What we're doing now is we're selling the invisible in some respects. And I say that because I was just introduced to a book, so I stole that term. We're not necessarily selling something that a customer absolutely knows that they need it or knows what they need. So it's a different perspective. And I think the roadmap process really opened up the idea of helping to get a customer brought along the journey to get to a point that they actually do something,
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the framework, the SESME framework that they use to define smart manufacturing. And I agree with the point you made earlier that, and actually, Mike and I, we do some workshops and such, sort of on the front end of doing roadmaps for organizations. And I like to argue that the definition of smart manufacturing isn't as important as it is for you to define what it means for yourself. Mm-hmm. Right. So I agree adamantly with that. So you want to share a little bit, like, what are your key takeaways, or what were the aha moments, or was it just having a framework that you could use repeatably and teach to your people and your clients?
There were several aha moments. I think the attachment of what we were pursuing to the entire business was relative to, I'll say, an aha moment. Always thought that leadership is a main component, but didn't really put a lot of value on the cross-functional team aspect of this. And I think by going through the accelerator, started to see where all those pieces come together and the importance of it. And honestly, it's changed my conversations. It's changed my conversations to something that's abstract, to something that's very, you can look at it and say, I can see us doing this, you know?
Yeah. Well, the first one of those workshops I was referencing, I actually did it in Mike's hometown, and at the end of the event, one of the attendees got up and walked up to me and said, "My company has put this all on my shoulders. Like, I'm the guy to figure this out." And he said, "My main takeaway from this is that they all have a role to play, and we can use this approach to talk with everybody and see where they fit." So that aligns with what you're saying.
Yeah, and I want to reiterate the fact, or one thing for sure, is that I believe that systems integrators play the biggest role in delivery of this. And if you're a systems integrator that's not starting to think about the OT component of delivering solutions, you really need to, because the country needs you. Right now, we're limited in respect to who can go out there and do these things. The market's so big, we can't afford to not help each other out to create this emphasis. There's not enough people to do the work that's out there.
Yep.
From my perspective.
Well, that's great. So, I think I saw a blog that you put out there on LinkedIn, and maybe I'm getting too specific, but could you kind of then summarize maybe I know you talked about what you learned from taking the training, but what are some of the key steps the manufacturer should take on their smart manufacturing journey?
Yeah, as I said before, there's a mindset that you have to go into it with a bit of humbleness, actually seek to learn, and everybody's different with regard to that. You're not always going to get leadership buy-in, and I've helped with those challenges, and nor do you need to. A leader may not see value in what you're trying to present. And if you're a continuous improvement manager, those are the things where they hire somebody in. Now they want to change the organization, and whoa, we can't do that. But when you start impacting the P&L in ways that they don't understand, then you get their attention. And a lot of times, like I said, it's not a huge investment to impact the P&L. You can increase revenue, reduce costs of goods today. And there's always opportunities, even in the biggest manufacturers.
Yes.
We've helped solve problems that are very simple. It's just somebody lacked the focus to go and fix the problem. They just dealt with it. And when we showed them, you can fix this problem in a day, just let us do it we'll do it for free. Those are things that I believe impact leadership and their perspective. Of course, it all comes to the leadership, but it doesn't necessarily have to start there.
That's really great. I think sometimes what seems like the most complex problem is really very simple to solve, and just sometimes it takes what I call fresh eyes. When when you're in your environment for a long time, sometimes you just don't see what's right in front of you.
Yes.
It's a natural thing to become sort of integrated into your environment and not see some of those things. And something from the outside comes in and goes, do you realize that and you go, gosh, thank you. No, I didn't realize, but that makes a lot of sense. And off you go, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll say we go against the grain a little bit with respect to that. I've networked with some of my fellow recipients of the certification, and the hardest problem that it seems like everybody is having is getting the customer to just get off the starting block and do something. And, if you approach it from this big perspective, it takes longer in some circumstance just to get them to do something. And so what we found is, give them something simple, deliver something simple to start the process, right? and let them see how easy it is, because it really is. But I can tell you, we have a large enterprise customer, Fortune 100, that we've been with them for 9 years developing their MES capabilities. And I can tell you that it should have been where it is today 8 years, 6 years ago, 5 years ago. But that's that Titanic, right? So with the smaller manufacturers, we've seen them grow rapidly. And it all comes down to that first step of just humbling up, saying we're going to do something different here, and we're going to empower the people to help deliver it. And from a team perspective, we start to see this gelling that occurs within the leadership of the organization. And I'm talking, plant manager, not the C-suite necessarily, but more down a notch. Right. And they start to understand how they can help each other, how quality can help engineering, can help operations, can help maintenance. And the relevance in that is where the data empowerment really starts to gain a head of steam, when they start seeing that we're not in this silo. We need to operate cross-functionally and truly understand the benefits of what we bring to the metrics that we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, that's great. So as we've been talking for about half an hour already now, and maybe we should probably work our way towards wrapping up, Scott.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Maybe Mike, you want to start us off? Do you have any final thoughts for our audience from what we've heard so far today? And then we'll ask Scott to comment as well.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Well, obviously we started off with a technical glitch, so we know that technology is not the answer to everything. So
absolutely.
So building off of that, I mean, I guess, to me, a key takeaway from what Scott had to say is really defining what smart manufacturing means for yourself, right? Having a language that you can use to understand what it means for you is really, really important. So I think that's fantastic advice. And I think the approach that he's talking about, leveraging the Sesame framework, is really valuable. And the other point is that it's really a leadership challenge. It's a leadership opportunity to help guide your company forward, and really, potentially lead from anywhere. Leadership does not necessarily mean just the C-suite, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that'd be my main takeaways for the day, Mike.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. We did have a question come in while you were sharing, and it's a great way for me to ask Scott, and then maybe let Scott wrap up. But okay. It's too long for me to show it on the screen. But I want to paraphrase what was asked. This individual is talking about that his company is taking making a global initiative in terms of digital culture, but it turns out that they're focused first on sales and not on the shop floor. Sales is important, right, to focus on digital tools in the sales area. But this person asks, seems to me that the industrial sites are not the priority. I thought that they should be. Any advice on how we could maybe switch this scenario, how we could influence turning the attention towards manufacturing versus the sales organization?
Great question. I'll say, generally speaking, manufacturers are either generally product centric, quality, delivery, or they're a sales culture and they sell everything and they want to make everything. There is opportunity from a sales perspective of relevance in that communications with your customers is vital. Information associated with that communication, if it's not had, like you can't tell your customers that we're not going to deliver today, we're going to deliver in 3 days. If you don't have the capability to see that, or, depending on what you make, I mean, like I said, it's a great question, but it's highly complex. I would say start with something small that would give some visual impact to your sales team that would make their life easier.
Well,
and that's the question.
Yeah, Scott, I think his question is more, how does he turn that attention to the industrial sites
Oh, well,
from the sales team? And
yeah. And I think, again, this is where having a collaborative discussion around it, either and again, if you bring somebody in from the outside that's been there, done that, and truly understands the impact it can make, then I think you can do an effective job of where the value is to be had on the industrial side, in almost all circumstances.
Yeah, I think also to complement that, to really understand as a company, what would the future look like, or what would it look like today if you could produce everything you could sell, right?
Mm-hmm.
And understand, your cost of sales and the value of you being able to, keep up with demand, right? So, and I think that'll lead folks into a conversation about what is your true capacity, what are your true costs, right? What are your true capabilities, and put that value on that. Because if you throw the switch and you can sell a whole lot of stuff, but you can't deliver it, then you're sunk, right?
Then you can't sell a lot of stuff.
Right.
So I appreciate that. That's a question from Wilson in Brazil. So I guess I'll say obrigado for that. Thank you, Wilson.
Right.
Scott, any final comments before we wrap up then as well?
Yeah, I'd just like to leave the audience with the idea to try not to overcomplicate this. If it's a big deal and it's a big thing and everybody needs to do it. It all starts with something. And that something is short, small wins that you can scale into. And it doesn't necessarily have to start with one thing or another. Really focus on what's going to have the largest impact on my business that I can solve in the next 3 months, because it exists. If you do that, you'll get a slow start, but I guarantee you that it'll start to put fuel on the fire of people understanding the value of the concept and what it could bring to the organization. And low-hanging fruit is out there to have. But more importantly, start small, scale big, but start now. Don't let this simmer, because everybody else is going to be doing something, and they probably already are. Just start to make it more meaningful towards your business, and forget about trying to replicate somebody else's success, because every single manufacturer is different. I don't care if they make the same products, because the culture is different. So
great. Well, thank you, Scott. So I appreciate that. So I just want to thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us and share your experience and your perspective on why and how companies should get started on their smart manufacturing journey. It's been a great conversation.
Thank you, Mike. I love this.
Yeah, thank you. So just a quick comment. The Industry 4.0 Club would like to encourage you to take action. That's really the key here. To advance the deployment of Industry 4.0, you can do that by reading an article, attending a workshop, developing a smart manufacturing roadmap for your plant or your company, and kind of as Wilson asked us, challenge your organization to move forward in the deployment of Industry 4.0. We'd like to know what actions you're taking, so please drop us a note on our link to our LinkedIn page or to our website and let us know what you're doing. The Industry 4.0 Club routinely hosts conversations like these on LinkedIn and YouTube. If you'd like to join us on a future broadcast, we'd be happy to see if we can find a way to do that. Again, reach out on our website, which is www.industry40club.com, or our LinkedIn page. And that kind of wraps up the conversation. So thanks again, Scott. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate your time.
And everybody have a great rest of the day.